Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today, again, a very important topic. Perhaps this is what the exact abstract of the Prime Minister's interview to CGTN is all about. The Pak-China relationship, over 70 years old, and as we call it, that it is higher than the mountains, deeper than the oceans, and sweeter than honey. There's no doubt. China has always been with Pakistan in thick and thin. And so the case is with Pakistan. Pakistan has always stood by China whenever they needed us. Now, since when we talk about the regional development, we talk about a very interesting phenomena that the 21st century is all about Asia. And this is actually true. Look at the kind of development that is taking place. Look at China emerging not only as an economic power, but now as a military power also. It has a lot of influence. And similarly, you talk about Russia, they are gaining their own space, slowly but surely. But looking at the Western world, obviously, the allies are there, and there seems to be some sort of a conflict as far as their understanding is concerned. There seems to be a divide between the West and the East. So perhaps, where will it lead? Is it the beginning of the new Cold War? Or it has already started? These are all huge question marks. Where will it lead? And especially when you talk about the transformation from geopolitical to geo-economic phenomena, perhaps countries like Pakistan, they'll have to think twice that what sort of an approach they need to adopt. To talk about that, I'll definitely introduce you to the panelists in a little while, but before that, the production team has prepared a report. Let's watch that.
Premier Imran Khan unequivocally asserted that Pakistan cannot be pressed into changing or downgrading its relations with China, as he took the US and Western powers to task for compelling developing countries to pick sides.
For Pakistan, there was always a very special relationship with China, although our relationship started 70 years ago. But, you know, China, whenever Pakistan was in trouble, whenever I'm in trouble politically, internationally, when we had conflicts with our neighbor, China always stood with us. So this relationship has only got stronger. We should have good relationship with everyone. And, you know, it's not going to happen that if there's pressure put on Pakistan to change its relationship or downgrade its relationship with China, it won't happen. No. Because the relationship between Pakistan and China is very deep.
This interview was conducted to mark time-tested special friendship and relationship spanning over 70 years. Furthermore, escalating US-China rivalry in post-pandemic world and burgeoning speculations of intensifying Pakistan-India rivalry due to resurgence of bloc politics were also the focal point. Prime Minister Khan noted the perception that India is supposed to lean to the Western world to counterbalance China is going to be very detrimental for India and regional security. He suggested for India to strengthen mutually advantageous straight ties with China instead of picking sides in the great power competition. Earlier in October 2020, former US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo called on key Asian allies, including India, Japan, Australia, the Quad grouping, to forge a united front against an increasingly assertive Beijing. While Washington, Sydney, Tokyo, and New Delhi all are at loggerheads with Beijing, Islamabad venerates its long history of diplomatic and bilateral relations with Himalayan neighbor. Sino-Pakistan relations are heading towards win-win partnership as China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, flagship project of the President Xi Jinping's Belt and Road Initiative, is one of the most important endeavor of entire scheme. Besides economic ties, the Sino-Pakistan political relationship has been further bolstered as Pakistan and China stand together in every international fora.
So now you can well imagine the kind of relationship these two countries have enjoyed. Whether you talk about the diplomatic relationship, you talk about the military support, you talk about the joint ventures, you talk about the historical perspective, or you talk about bringing in China and bringing them close to the Western world. It was none other than Pakistan. Henry Kissinger or Nixon, you talk about that time period, that was when Pakistan really, in fact, brought these countries together and a new chapter started. Now, quickly, let me introduce you to our panelists. In our studio, we have with us, on my right is Shahid Raza Saab. Director CTAD, SASSI, Center for Defense, Armament and Technology. Thank you so much, Saab, for your time, sir. And we also have with us Shaukat Paracha Saab. Again, needs no introduction, senior journalist, a writer and a television host. Thank you so much, Paracha Saab, for your time. And we also have with us on Skype Masood Khalid Saab, former ambassador to China. Thank you very much, Ambassador Saab, for your time, sir. Pleasure to have you on the show. Sir, if you allow me, let me start off from Excellency here, sir. Masood Khalid Saab, since this program is about the Pakistan-China relationship, sir, currently it seems that there is a divide which is getting widened with each passing day between the West and the East, in particular China and the United States of America. Now, the situation for Pakistan seems to be very tricky, sir. We have always been an ally of the West. Even during the war on terror, we were the non-NATO ally, and perhaps we did a lot in that regard also. But now, sir, it seems after that interview which we all saw the other day, that Pakistan has been perhaps given a choice either to choose the Eastern Belt or to go with the Western Belt. We know the history of the Western Belt in the past also, sir. Do you think this is a very important juncture where Pakistan really has to decide where to go, and how to create an equilibrium between the West and the East, sir? Your takes, Ambassador Saab.
Thank you. I think this categorical statement from the Prime Minister has laid to rest whatever apprehensions were there about a drift in our relations, a so-called drift in our relations with China, or, skeptics asking questions, raising questions about BRI and, about CPEC, etc. So I'm not surprised by this categorical assertion on the part of Prime Minister, because given our relations, as you mentioned, a time-tested, all-weather relationship, which has endured for the last 70 years, it is but natural for us to state clearly and categorically that Pakistan will never abandon its friendship and relationship with China, whatever pressures there may be on Pakistan. Now, traditionally, during the Cold War, of course, we were an ally of the Western camp in terms of our membership of SATO and CENTO. But then, if you study Pakistan-China relations, then in the early 60s, we took a turn and a tilt in our foreign policy started towards China, and then onwards, we moved on. So today, this relationship is, as you pointed out, multifaceted, multi-layered, and multidimensional, and very deep-rooted, as the Prime Minister himself said. So going back on that relationship, where two friends of unequal size have stood by each other and withstood all pressures, have supported each other, be it their core interest or be it Pakistan's national interest. At multilateral fora, bilaterally, China has helped Pakistan, in terms of economic cooperation, our big projects, now CPEC, and Pakistan vice versa. Within our capacity, we have always extended support to China on their core issues. So this is a kind of relationship which is very unique and special. And this is not possible, this relationship is not possible to define through the traditional, prism of conventional diplomacy or definition of conventional diplomacy. It is unique. It is different. It's very special. So, yes, there are pressures, and there will always be pressure, given Pakistan's geography, given Pakistan's geopolitical importance, the fact that we are a bridgehead between different regions. So there will always be pressures and volatility in our region. You look at Afghanistan, you look at Middle East, you look at our relations with India. So, this is not a new factor. But yes, sometimes pressures go up, sometimes pressures come down. But that does not mean that you go back on this lovely tradition which two countries have maintained over the past 70 years of standing by each other. So there is no question in my mind that that will not happen. And about the divide, yes, US policy is very clear, in terms of their doctrine, in terms of their strategy papers, which have come in the last 5 years or so. And now we have this Strategic Competition Act. So there are a host of documents and host of measures which the sole superpower has taken to sort of contain China. And I would say that there is kind of a cross-party consensus in the United States to sort of, within quotes, fix China. Now, during the Trump administration, there was a different policy approach, more belligerent, there was a lot of rhetoric, and also, of course, actions which Trump took. And, the former Secretary of State Pompeo even declared that, the fight was on to topple this Communist Party of China, which is like seeking a regime change in China. And CPC is the persona of China. So, I mean, it is really, it was very provocative. But Biden, who is more experienced in foreign policy affairs, has changed that, is somewhat more nuanced. But the basic policy approach, a basic strategy of the United States to contain China will continue. And it has introduced a lot of, polarization in the international system. Of course, it will affect their own relations, the relations between the United States and China,
affected.
But will also affect countries like Pakistan and, Europe. So what US is trying to do is to sort of conjure up a coalition of its allies, the Squad, and the recent G7 summit of coming out of, describing China as a systemic rival and this and that. So this is a very dangerous trend in international politics. And instead of focusing on the challenges which the global community faces today, like, for example, of course, COVID pandemic, water security, food security, terrorism, xenophobia, cyber crimes, all these, we would have thought that this would sort of, and the marginalization of international institutions like the United Nations and unilateralism, protectionism, and this approach of, the winner takes it all or zero-sum game. I mean, this approach has really destabilized the international system and created a lot of problems for us.
The question now that is there is like, what would be the future like? What sort of an engagement will take place? Is it going to be like the Russia-USA relationship? Because Russia at that time was a military power. But having said that, China currently perhaps is not a military power as such as compared to USA, but still, look at the economic giant, look at the roots Chinese have, look at the kind of exports they are doing. So a lot is changing. But coming to you, Shahid Saab, now a couple of points, since ambassadors have mentioned about G7 summit. The European countries, perhaps like Germany or Italy, I mean, they wanted to create a balance. Obviously, they have their own interests with the Chinese, whereas you talk about Canada, you talk about United States of America or Britain, they are following, a certain policy. And now, regarding containing China, I think earlier, post 9/11, when the Americans came in this region and stayed here for almost 20 years, that containment had started even then. The routes which the Chinese had planned to go into the Western world or towards Europe or into Russia or the Central Asian states or via Pakistan into the Middle East, I mean, their whole idea was contained time-wise. But now, obviously, things are getting better. But still, looking at the future now, the kind of engagement that would be there for this particular region, in particular for Pakistan, the kind of relationship that is very alarming, that is between China and India, or perhaps India and Pakistan. The first meeting that was held right after Joe Biden took charge was Quad. So we can see the priorities, we can see the policy direction. Where is it heading now?
In order to correctly understand this, we need to go back in history a little bit. So between 1945 to early 90s, when the Second World War ended and the Cold War ended in early 1990s, we actually lived in a bipolar world order, where, as you stated earlier, that Soviet Union was a great military power. It was not an economic power, but it was a great military power that occupied a large part of Europe and therefore had a lot of relevance to the global politics. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, we see that the world transformed into a unipolar order. And by design and definition, the China containment strategy had already started because, as you've rightly pointed out, China became the new threat since the early 90s and into the early 2000s because of the Chinese economic reforms in the late 80s. Chinese economy was growing very fast.
Earlier Chinese were also used by the Americans to counter the Russians and not let have that sole power in the region.
It's funny how geopolitics works, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, China at some point in time was a bulwark against Stalin. They were working closely with the Americans. They were being supplied American military hardware, etc. But coming back to your early point regarding G7, so what we are seeing right now is a conflict between unipolarity and multipolarity. So the Western order is trying to maintain the unipolar world order that exists, and it favors them because they divide certain portions of global power among themselves. As you've mentioned, Britain and other second-tier powers. So they have certain influence in the global structure because of this unipolar structure. But what's happening is China is cultivating its own alliances, and it is trying to transform the world into a multipolar structure, not a bipolar structure. So in this context, Prime Minister's statement is very, very significant and very profound, because what we can see is that there is a great regional alliance that is taking place between Pakistan, China, Russia, Iran, Turkey, and other Central Asian countries. So when we talk about the interests of, let's say, countries like Italy or Canada, even all the way to the US, this is something we need to understand. What is the genesis of the so-called Quad? It goes back all the way to 2009 when President Obama visited Australia, and he unrolled his Asia-Pacific strategy that ended up transformed into the Quad semi-alliance at this point in time. The problem with Quad is that every member of Quad, including the United States, which is the biggest economy in the world and the biggest military power, they cannot simply ignore China, and they cannot take on China directly, because China just happens to be the single biggest trading partner of every Quad member. It is the biggest trading partner with Australia. It is the biggest trading partner with India, Japan, and the US. So for their own geostrategic interests, they simply cannot arm twist China, because it will have a very significant and profound economic impact at home. I mean, if you just look at what's happening with the Australian economy right now after China imposed some economic sanctions on the Australian economy. So G7, I think it's more of a show of support and solidarity with the US and with Joe Biden, rather than actually translating into an effective China containment strategy, because there is something very important. You earlier mentioned that China is not a military power. It is true, but China is
not as compared to the
as
US.
compared to the US, but it is the bridge between the firepower dynamics of the US and China is closing very, very fast. China at this point in time has the largest navy in the world. It is not the US. At this point in time, the largest navy in the world is China. The largest army in the world is China. And by the number of aircrafts and available manpower, the largest air force in the world is China. But there is a difference. The United States has a very, very clear capability, technological advantage in terms of military firepower, and obviously the military technology that they have. So it kind of balances it out, the numerical advantage of the Chinese PLA forces. There is one very important element in the Quad, that is India. India is a proxy country in the Quad alliance, because if you look at closely, out of all 4 countries, there's only one country in Quad that actually has a land border with China, and that is India. So that can be connected directly.
It's a long border.
Yeah, and it's a long border, and that is exactly what happened in the escalation between India and China in Galwan, when 20 Indian soldiers were killed and China took over about 1,000 square kilometers of Indian territory. It is because the Quad is banking on
And that is not only about Ladakh. Perhaps if you go to Sikkim or certain other areas, Chinese have a very strong claim that historically, you talk about the border with the Tibet.
Yep.
area. And they believe that historically this was Andhra Pradesh and certain other areas. They were the Chinese areas, and they still claim. But I'll come back to you. Paracha sir, first of all, sir, you have covered so many conferences, you've been a speaker yourself, and as far as the foreign policy is concerned, we always end up seeing you there. And one of those journalists who's always taking notes and trying to keep a track, and mashallah, you have got a great memory also. But sir, having said that, when we talk about the diplomatic tone, it is always between two lines, you know, so that you can maneuver. Over here, sir, what we heard from the Prime Minister was very straight. There is no grey area, it's black or white, that yes, this is what China is doing for us, this is what China has done in the past, this is how we want to keep the relationship with them. As far as West is concerned, sir, I was just looking at a few numbers. Forget about the imports. I'm talking about the exports, because that is the backbone. And the kind of influence the Americans or the West they have on the Middle Eastern countries. Forget about the remittances for a while. Sir, most of our export either to EU or to USA. Now, do you think Pakistan can afford this kind of a shift, which seems inevitable, sir?
Thank you very much. It was quite enlightening to listen back former ambassador to China, Ambassador Masood Khalid, who is luckily here in your show. He has been there in China for a long time and just got rich, narration from him. When we talk about choices, basically the foreign policy or the pursuit of foreign policy must be winning friends from all sides. It's not, putting your eggs in one or the other basket, The mistake or blunder that we did during the Cold War, should we go again for that this time, choosing some other side, you see. This is the question basically. And you are talking about Prime Minister's interview yesterday. Why not we also talk about Prime Minister's speech today made in the National Assembly, where he made it clear, that China is there, I mean, so much, so many things talked about the United States, and short of saying that we do not want to have relations with United States, rest of the thing they were very clear in Prime Minister's tone. Whatever has been, as Ambassador Excellency has rightly pointed out, the historical background, and my friend has also talked about, but there has been another element in China-Pakistan relation, and that has been CPAC, you see, that there was much pump and show about CPAC, the fate changer, no more being heard nowadays, Prime Minister said in his interview yesterday that there can be no pressure to, undergrade our relationship with China, but nowadays increasingly people are asking why there is an impression of slowdown on China-Pakistan economic corridor. I mean, it was.
Is there a slowdown?
It is. When let me now respond to this question. When there are questions about certain projects, when there are publicly questions about the award of contract or the mechanism through which the contracts are awarded, and who is asking? The government, the ministers, the functionaries. Look at, recently the questions about the coal-fired plants, which are producing electricity. Then there was Multan Metro being questioned and probed even, CPEC was not merely roads and highways and motorways. It was beyond that, I mean, where are the special economic zones? Now we starting one at Rashakai. Why is there any progress in the last 3 years that we have seen, and only slow down, So this is my question, primary question, strategic ties very good, not only bilaterally but even at the forum of Shanghai Cooperation Organization. You are bringing in Russia, that's a bigger platform, you see. There has also been a shift in the US policy, partly touched by His Excellency. President Trump, he was basically containing within the boundaries of United States. President Biden is, reintroducing multilateralism, multi-fora, as G7 has been talked about. So, Trump's belligerency, very rightly pointed out by Excellency Ambassador Masood Khalid Saab, from belligerency to diplomacy, So belligerency could not work, or maybe, since he got defeated, had President Trump been there, the same policy would have continued. But since Biden is there, President Biden is a very, sharp
Raja, we all
diplomat,
thought that, Trump perhaps is taking some wrong decisions, and the moment Biden will come in, he's going to perhaps reverse. But as far as their policy towards China is concerned, it's almost even they are being a little rough and harder on the Chinese.
He is bringing other allies, on the same platform, which is being perceived by the United States as they should contain China, So Pakistan's relation with China, as is the myth, they are very good, higher than Himalayas and deeper than the ocean. But the innovations which were introduced, and this strategic partnership was to be transformed into economic, commercial, financial, exports, largest export. If you talk of the single country exports, that the destination is United States. If you talk of the group of the countries, that's the EU, GSP plus, for example. Pakistan's exports, Pakistan's bilateral trade with United States in favor of Pakistan. Pakistan's bilateral trade with the European Union, always in favor of Pakistan. These aspects cannot be ignored. I'll again say, the policy that we pursued during the Cold War, that we were allies only of the West, and what was CENTO? CETO. CENTO was here, but CETO was exactly in the region, Southeast Asia, China, etc., etc. The blunder, the mistake, whatever we term today, at least today, when we take a path for a new, policy or partnership, and CPAC was introduced for this purpose. But the impression, the perception at the moment in Pakistan is that why these 3 years they have seen a slowdown, in implementation of the projects, whether there was some problem. But reassuring is the Prime Minister's statement of yesterday that we will not allow Pak-China relationship to go, in a way that some skepticism is, or some eyebrows are raised about it. That's very good. And President Xi Jinping's visit is also on the cards to Pakistan. Yeah. I am really looking forward to it. When he is there, you remember when he was here in Pakistan, yes, and what was the controversy. So when he is here, now the Prime Minister Imran Khan, PTI, they will also, roll a red carpet for him. And I'm sure that if there is anything, any bottlenecks or any doubts or any problem in the implementation,
so we should expect some sort of a strategic, statements coming from the Chinese premier, and perhaps, sort of giving some sort of an assurance to Pakistan that we will also stand.
They always have been. For example, after OBL incident, only one country spoke, and that was Premier of China.
Yes.
That he called upon the world that time is there. What Prime Minister said today, when he was talking about bases to Americans, he said whether the Americans acknowledged our sacrifices. The Chinese Prime Minister, the same Prime Minister is sitting here now at the moment, the incumbent Prime Minister, he said what we are now expecting from United States, and he called upon the world that do acknowledge the contributions or the sacrifices made by Pakistani people, Pakistani security forces, Pakistani losses. Prime Minister today said $150 billion. Chinese have been talking
half
about
of your economy. Imagine.
Almost half of our economy. And then, these are the calculation, but if you calculate the additional surcharges on Pakistani exports, it becomes a huge figure.
Yeah,
you see.
I'm sure, absolutely spot on. Now, sir, coming to you, Ambassador Saab, another very important point that I would like you to throw light on is about the future dynamics. Whenever I read articles written by the pro-US writers, you would see that they have a different, approach towards that. Whenever you talk about, people who are slightly anti-America, there's a different sort of a strategy altogether. But sir, now, looking at the current situation, the kind of you know deals that the Americans are offering to the Indians to sort of uplift them, improve their military technology. Obviously, India cannot be ignored. It is like a huge country, population-wise, 10 times, 8 times, 7 times bigger than Pakistan, area-wise so big as well. What the problem seems to be is about the Chinese and the Indians. Now, the general perception is that the Americans perhaps might use the Indians. Could be some sort of a border conflict or something of that sort, where the Americans and the West would support the Indians against the Chinese. Do you see such a scenario developing, sir, where there could be a possible conflict at a larger scale? Because earlier we were just talking about the skirmishes for the matter in certain areas. But do you think this can go beyond what is happening at the moment? Because according to a report, the Indians have deployed over 50,000 troops on the border with the Chinese, sir. Ambassador Saab?
Well, there have been reports on both sides of amassing troops. Yes, 50,000 Indian troops have been deployed, and on the Chinese side also, perhaps there has been, a substantial sort of increase in the number. Well, if you go back last year when this Galwan Valley clash took place, I think the point which Chinese wanted to, drive home to Indians was that, look, we will not accept any encroachment of what they say or what they perceive to be their sort of line of actual control. And when they saw that India was encroaching or stepping on their toes, then they decided to teach Indians a lesson. And right now, they are very much in the Indian territory, and they have quite a significant, chunk of Indian territory in their hand. And they are not, and the talks between the military sides of both countries have not made much headway. So I think this is what the Indians are being told is to accept this new ground reality. Okay. Now, as far as a bigger clash is concerned, I am not sure. I think it goes into the realm of speculation, because both are nuclear powers, India as well as China. Both are neighbors. And China, for that matter, is very pragmatic and prudent. China does not want any conflict at this point in time, either with the United States, of course, given the disadvantage it has in terms of technology vis-a-vis the United States still, but even with India, because right now the priority of the Chinese leadership, Chinese government, is to focus on their economic development. And they have laid out clear-cut targets. Where do they want to take China by the year 2049, which is still quite far away. But they are gradually, achieving their targets, like, for instance, elimination of absolute poverty. And one by one, next year is crucial for China, 2022, when Xi Jinping's tenure, 2-year term will come to an end. There'll be a debate, although he has been elected for life. But I think there'll be a debate in China. So China also faces its own challenges. What so I am not sort of prepared to accept that there'll be a big clash between China and India. China is earning a lot of money through trade with India, and China would not like to, engage itself in that theater with India. China's focus is mainly on in the direction of South China Sea and East China Sea, Taiwan. These are their priorities, because Taiwan is a flashpoint. And by the way, I want to share with you that, several studies, including the one by Rand Corporation in USA, has established that in the war games, they've established that if there is a clash between US and China in the Taiwan Strait, China is going to win. So please don't underestimate China's military prowess. China is moving fast. China is already a credible economic power, and they are also trying to overcome and bridge the deficit in terms of military technology and other sophisticated technologies. So, but at this point in time, my assessment is that China does not want any conflict or confrontation. That's why in our own region also, for instance, in Afghanistan, the situation is, getting very serious.
Yeah.
And there are, most of the projections are that hopefully not, but it may drift into a civil war. But China would like to see stability in our region, stability in South Asia,
So
stability
look at
in
the kind of
Afghanistan.
investments the Chinese have made in Afghanistan also. I mean, they are talking about progress. They are talking about, the philosophy that regions should grow together, and it should be a win-win situation for all the countries in the region. But so perhaps one more important point, since you mentioned about Taiwan. I mean, statements coming from Japan, or sometimes we end up hearing certain statements coming in from other Western countries regarding the human rights issue, or the, these camps where, I'm not sure, but we have heard that over about 1 million people have been, subjected to torture, and they have been detained, and so on and so forth, where the Chinese claim that they're being trained, and this is total nonsense kind of a propaganda by the Western world. Now, so quick comment on two very important regions. So first of all, do you think this BRI or Ober project versus the kind of engagement that the West has shown that they will be investing, or sort of, persuading certain countries, to have a similar kind of an initiative worth around $40 trillion. Sir, that's a lot of money. A lot of influential countries. I mean, everybody wants to go to the West, perhaps, look at the kind of interest from this region, that is towards, traveling, or perhaps shifting or moving out or studying in the Western world. That is still there. And then you talk about that countermeasures by the West. Sir, do you think this is going to be the major conflict in the future, investment pouring into different countries just to persuade to take sides?
Well, as far as this new initiative to counter BRI is concerned, I think there are no details shared yet. So we are not sure. As far as BRI is concerned, China has already made considerable progress. More than 100 countries are now partners in this initiative, including Pakistan. And the benefits are reaching to these countries. So I don't think that the project, which has not yet taken off the ground, can compete now with the project which has already completed almost 5 years of its cycle and has made a steady progress. You would know that about 5,000 cargo trains, if I'm not wrong, are going between China and Europe every year. So, this interdependency, trade, and as earlier pointed out, China being the largest trading partner of USA, ASEAN, European countries. But one must bear in mind that European countries also, European allies of the United States, are not on the same page entirely. They have their own economic and commercial interests with China.
Absolutely.
Yes, so they don't want to choose between US and China, Germany, Italy, several others. They have their own interests. As far as Pakistan is concerned, Pakistan-China relations are not CPEC specific only. We have very deep and substantive cooperation with China in several fields, be it military, be it security, strategic cooperation, and now economic cooperation, science and technology. CPEC is now entering into a second phase. Yes, there has been a perception about its slowness in the last 2 or 3 years, but this renewed commitment by Prime Minister and his government that there will be no going back or slow down of CPEC, I think it's quite reassuring. And we hope that the second phase of CPEC, which is now broadened in its scope, will bring in more benefits to Pakistan. And mind you that Pakistan-China relationship serves the cause of peace and stability in this region. We give each other diplomatic and strategic space. China is supporting us, for example, on crucial issues, like security issues like NSG, Nuclear Suppliers Group, FATF, UN Security Council sanctions, listing issues, Indian membership of the Security Council, permanent membership. and several other issues. So and vice versa, we also support China on their core issues, and this is an understanding which has gone on and which has now reached at a point where a reversal is not likely. As far as this question of choosing sides, Pakistan has been in the past, uh, if, I mean, maintained a fair balance, between in its relations between U.S. and China. But if you analyze and study the trajectory of our relationship with USA, it is totally different than our relationship with China. We have been There has been one ally which has ditched us, which has
All right.
not fulfilled its sort of commitments time and again, as against a partner which is our neighbor. Uh, United States is far away, and China is our neighbor. China's influence in the region will continue to grow, and this new arc of partnership which is evolving, which I think Mr. Paracha alluded to, China, Russia, Iran, Turkey, Central Asian republics, they have a convergence, of on peace in our region, on peace and stability in Afghanistan, and focusing on
Absolutely.
geoeconomics.
That's a
Because
very
these Central
important point,
Asian
Raza.
republics and Afghanistan, for example,
Absolutely. All
they
right.
look towards Pakistan because of its geography to have access to, Arabian Sea for their trade and commerce. So these are the advantages which Pakistan has, and my
All right.
concluding thought is that
I think it's high time that we should play our cards very wisely. But coming to you now, Shahid Saab, two, three important areas. If you remember the time of General Musharraf, I mean, there are different stories, obviously. There's one version from General's point of, there's another from other. If you remember Richard Armitage, it is believed that he, in fact, very directly told the president that, are you with us or are you against us? Simple as that. So you have to choose between one. And, then we were told that, we would have been sent back in the
Back to the
Stone Age or something of
Yep.
that sort. And, that's why we chose to. So it means that you chose to without, willing to choose. But you had no other choice. You were forced to be a part of that group, number one. Now, sir, there is a similar situation over here as well, sir. You be with us or you be, whatever. Now, looking at the current situation, sir, the kind of effects Pakistan can have. For example, I was going through so many other countries' list regarding FATF, and Paracha Sahab, I was surprised to see that the kind of compliance which we have shown, no other country has shown, and they're in the white list. So, to me, it's no more about the FATF, it's a political influential decision. Simple as that. The moment Pakistan is going to give them a little hint that, okay, we will consider that, you will be out of the FATF. I'm not exactly sure what sort of disadvantage we are having regarding the FATF, but I'm sure there has to be an image, credibility, and so many other things associated and attached. But Shahid Saab, tell us now, with us, without us, when you talk about the military training, you talk about the military hardware, the kind of dependency that you have on countries like France, UK, USA. Do you think we can shy away from that and opt for something different, where the cultures do not match, where the language do not match, where the religion doesn't match, where the values, your eating habits, there is a whole range, so multifaceted approach.
Okay, so in order to understand this, this is what I would like to say. First of all, Pakistan in 2021 is not the Pakistan in 2001.
What's the difference?
The difference is you cannot bomb us back to Stone Age, because we will bite back.
There was problem in Afghanistan. There is still problem in Afghanistan. The kind of relationship that we had with the Indians is getting worse. With Iran, it's still the same similar kind of situation.
The situation
with the Middle Eastern countries, exactly the kind of relationship we are enjoying at the moment. We are not. And the kind of economic pressure that we are facing, that wasn't there.
I'll come back to the economic pressure. There are a few things I would like to address first. Number one, Pakistan is not the same country it was in 2001. We, in terms of our military and defense capabilities, have taken some very significant and bold steps over the past 20 years. Pakistan is in a much stronger position to defend itself against foreign aggression as it was in 2001. Secondly, you suggested the impact of the FATF. It is quantified around $35 billion that have been lost to the Pakistani economy because of the political instrumentation that is happening against Pakistan at the FATF forum, because of Pakistan's political situation in Afghanistan and with China. And as you've rightly pointed out, if we send a hint to the West today that we are backing away from CPAC or trying to do their bidding as far as providing them air bases and everything else, we will be removed from the FATF. So it is pretty clear, and I think the foreign minister's statement has to be seen in a very specific context.
Absolutely.
But let me bring you back to something very important. Pakistan has not received any significant military hardware from the United States after 2011. So the last significant military deal that happened between Pakistan and the US was the delivery of 18 F-16C fighters. After that, Pakistan has not received any significant military system from the United States.
Even the 8 more you were supposed to be given?
Yes, and also 12 of Pakistan's AH-1 Zulu attack helicopters that were supposed to replace some of our aging old Cobra helicopters are still in storage in Texas, so they have not been delivered. There is no significant sale of naval hardware to Pakistan. Pakistan's Navy at this point in time is by and large made up of non-Western is very significant, non-Western military equipment. So we are getting equipment from Turkey, we are getting equipment from some small European countries.
But again, the moment Turkey was going to give you the helicopters and the engines were imported from USA,
yes.
Again the sanctions were put on them.
Definitely it is going to happen, because Pakistan at this point in time is trying to follow an independent strategy, an independent policy.
Are we in a position to?
I think what Pakistan should do...
Or are we getting there?
I think we are getting there, because there is something that needs to be understood. Pakistan is not just a non-NATO ally, a major non-NATO ally. We still are. We are also a member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So we are the zipper between the East and the West. We are as the ambassador pointed out rightly, we are the melting pot of the regional trade. We are the zipper of the regional trade.
So is India.
So, but India is not geographically located with China, Russia, Central Asia, Iran, some significant trade corridors. But let me tell you something very important. As Ambassador rightly pointed out, China has a very aggressive program. They have lifted over 500 million people out of poverty, and the expansion in Chinese middle class is so fast that it is actually shocking some global economic projections. So what's going to happen is that China eventually, as you remember, there has been a free trade agreement between Pakistan and China that has kind of given preferential treatment to about 200 Pakistani products. Eventually what's going to happen is that China will take over as the largest market for Pakistani products. And coming to your cultural point, I think the dissimilarities between China, with our relationship between China and Pakistan, are kind of the same as we have dissimilarities between the US and Pakistan. What I would say is that we have been trading as an older civilization. We've been trading with China for over 2,000 years. Yes, there are some cultural dissimilarities, but same points exist with the US as well.
Raza, closing remarks from you, sir.
I really look forward that the relationship between China and Pakistan, they will further grow. Not only because that there is a compulsion from the outer world, rather there is also an intent between the two countries. And this relationship always have been a people-to-people, people-centric relationship. Go to China, they still remember Sichuan earthquake and the dispatch of strategic needed tents from Pakistan. And similarly, China has always been a very good friend. Today, Prime Minister also talked about UAE, Saudi Arabia and China always coming to the assistance of Pakistan, to the support of Pakistan. And there is no dispute within the two countries that can lead to friction. The relationship is harmonious, and
but
the way
time will tell. It's all about wait and see kind of a strategy. But anyway, Paracha Saab, what a pleasure to have you, and thank you so much, Asaf, for your presence as well. And Ambassador Saab, was a pleasure to have you on the show as well, sir. Thank you so much for your time. And that's all we have for this hour. Time for news now. Khuda Hafiz.